Hey everyone,
Okay.
welcome to Journey 22. Today I have Harrison Foreman on. I've really been looking forward to this episode because Harrison, you're doing some cool shit. And so I'm
Ah,
excited to go into it and hear some good stories and hopefully get a couple of laughs. And yeah, I guess, just to start off here, if you can tell everybody a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, where you're from, maybe a little bit about, growing up, how you got to where you are today. So
definitely. Well, it's great to be here, Jared. Thanks for having me. You're up in Canada, right?
yeah,
I'm down here in New York City. Finally, a beautiful day. So a lot of sun out there, sun in here for this episode. Really pumped about this. So quick background on me. We could do like 10 episodes on my story and background, as I'm sure all of your guests. Originally from New Jersey, grew up relatively normal background. Was sort of always kind of doing media projects. I did my first show in high school, actually.
cool.
Freshman year of high school, pitched my principal on the sports debate show with Harrison Foreman. It was going to be this big thing, and we got it on the local channel. So that was my first
Right.
taste of entrepreneurship and entertainment, and all of those kind of coming together. Went to college at the University of Michigan, out in the Midwest. From there, I moved all the way west to San Francisco, the hub of all things starting something. And it's so cliche, but it really was my early 20s existential crisis. Just get me out there. Most of my college friends moved to New York or Chicago, and I kind of wanted to just be with my thoughts, do my thing, figure out me and what I want to do and what I want to be. Worked in tech, of course, as everyone does out there, and worked at Facebook for a couple of years, growing some of their media partnerships. But I got bit by both the entrepreneurial bug and also sort of the media bug at the same time. It was cool working at Facebook, helping creators. I want to be on the other side of the table, as you can imagine. And so, long story short, worked on my first media company out there. It was a smaller startup called Brunch Media. We'll get into like the origin story of my show, so I'll save that story for later.
Cool.
Did all of that and kind of discovered I love really two things: making people smile, laugh through content, and connecting, bringing people together, and doing that through kind of things that are just cool and culture in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. And long story short, I moved to New York a couple of years ago. I connected with the stand-up comic here in New York City. His name is Brandon Berman, who is the host of Updating. We'll get into that, and my creative partner for all things entertainment and media. And we started this show, this crazy live dating show, and it took off. And a couple years later, one pandemic later, here I am. And yeah, that's the high level. I'll stop talking for the intro.
No, that's cool. And I'm curious, like, were people in your family, were they always in media? Was it kind of just something you picked up when you were young? Like, or did you pick it up from like someone around you? I'm curious, how you just got into that world.
That's such a good question. It wasn't, most of my family are entrepreneurs for
Okay.
sure. So my grandfather, he owns a restaurant in Delhi. So he's always sort of been the owner of his company. My dad as well. And my mom in the yoga fitness space, always worked for herself. So there was definitely a culture of entrepreneurialism
Yeah.
and starting things. As far as media goes and kind of storytelling, I have some of my dad, he is this natural salesman, like just an unbelievable personality, so funny. We're at Starbucks growing up, always communicating with the barista, trying to make them laugh. I think that culture was evident. My grandfather was always witty, so I got a lot of humor from them. There was never really a family history of media or entertainment or comedy. None at all. It all kind of just happened, and I'm still. I find it took me a long time to even own being a personality, being a comedian, as opposed to like all the business entrepreneur stuff. It did take me a while. I always thought I was just a personable guy, but then I realized I have friends who are also very extroverted who work in finance, more extroverted than me, but they're not making people laugh like I can, and so just because I wasn't doing stand up, like I was becoming a comedian. And it was really cool to kind of realize that and then start through my own windy path, making it happen in a lot of ways.
No, that's cool. It's always funny too, like when I think back on my life, where I wouldn't call myself like a black sheep of the family, but I'm
Right.
different, right? And like no one in my family likes
Interesting.
sports. I kind of just like fell into them from school, right? And like
Right.
have those stories where it's like, what's your favorite team? I'm like, I rented Madden when I was young, and I liked
Oh,
the logo of the Vikings, and they became my team. I don't have, like the team passed down or anything like that. Even like entrepreneurship stuff like that is just kind of fell into it, and so it's always
interesting.
interesting to hear.
What are your folks do?
So they are both medical lab aides who work at labs
Oh,
here in Calgary, just like
okay.
testing samples, stuff like that, right? And it's like no one, even in my extended family, no one's really like done any entrepreneurial things. Like highest level would be middle management kind of thing, and it's
Right.
risk adverse and stuff like that. And I don't know, I'm like, no, this is fun, right? And so
Right. It's
yeah,
fun and there's a freedom element to it.
yeah,
And I am like a sucker for reading, as we all are, reading about entrepreneurs and creatives. And like you can autobiographies. I've read so many. I went through that phase and in high school and college for
yeah,
sure. And I think what you do realize, and I tell myself this often, is that and it's again, I'm going to throw in a lot of cliches during this, so work with me. But every path really is so different, and we're all on our own path. And in the creative world, you could look at J.K. Rowling not getting her first book published until mid 30s.
yeah,
You could look at there some massive fiction writers that were hedge fund fellas before,
yeah,
or there were just so many different paths. And I think I tell myself that very often because I didn't really have a traditional path, like work at a production company, get a job at BuzzFeed. Like I didn't really do all of that. I just made stuff.
yeah,
And Quentin Tarantino, not that I'm anywhere close to his category, he has a famous quote: I didn't go to film school. I just made films. Right. And I think that's so relevant for pursuing entrepreneurship and being in charge of something and just trusting your gut, I think is really important.
for sure. And I'm curious, do you think that was like, what do you think it was about your personality where you're like, I don't need to go to school, or I just want to make it? Was it like you like being in control? Was it like it was too slow? You looked at like school and you're just like, it's too slow. Like I don't want to take 4 years or 2 years or whatever it is to learn about one thing, and when I could make
Right.
tons. What do you think that was in you?
It's a good question. I did go to college.
Yeah,
I did do to the university thing, but I always kind of did my own path,
yeah,
even within that. My parents would say I've never liked rules
yeah,
and guidelines and regulations, which I don't know where that comes from. That is for sure. Like I've always kind of been I've always had the kind of brain that someone tells me to do something, I'm gonna try and figure out like why am I doing it that way? Why
yeah,
can't like that doesn't really make sense. There has to be another way.
yeah,
I've always liked just creating too. And my
yeah,
personality is never, I can't do repetitive things over and over. I
yeah,
still have to sometimes. We all have to make it work, pay the bills and things like that. But it's not, it doesn't work with my brain. It's
yeah.
extremely difficult for me. And then personality wise, I that's such a good question. Like so how does my personality kind of contribute
Yeah,
to being entrepreneurial?
I feel like a lot of times people feel like there's, the path that you have to take, right? It's like
Right,
that whole idea of, I have to go to school, I have to go to film school, I have to,
right.
work in a production company and like earn my way up to like now I can go and start making my own
Mm.
stuff, right?
Oh,
But
okay.
approaching it differently, right? Of just like, no, like I don't want to go that path. I'm just gonna start making shit. I'm gonna start putting it out. Like, and then
Right.
the rule thing makes sense to me of like why I feel like I can do that better almost. I feel like that's a very entrepreneurial trait. Like for me, for instance, it's I felt like I liked being rewarded for my output and not the amount of time that I put in, right? And it's like funny when I first start, like my first ever job in high school, I worked at Safeway, and I'm like, why am I getting paid half as much as somebody that's been here twice as long? when they're not doing anything and I'm doing so much more than them. That's like, that sounds stupid to me, right? And super competitive as well. It's like, I want to show you that I can achieve this, or like, hit that level or whatever it might be. And so when I look at it, I'm like, okay, I think that's kind of the things that, you know, why I
Mm,
went that untraditional path.
I see. No, and that makes a ton of sense. I can certainly relate to that. I think people who want to be entrepreneurs or carve their own path, it stares us in the window in the mirror, but we are extremely ambitious, right? And that has always been a part of my DNA. Reading business books in middle school or high school, I've always been just extremely hard on myself. It took me only until maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago to be a little less hard on myself around hitting goals by a certain time. But when I graduated college, I did not have any patience. I was just like, I want to be the CEO tomorrow,
Yeah,
or I want to be a star tomorrow, right? And I want all of these things to happen overnight. And that is why corporate world of working up and you pay your dues, I never really understood that
yeah,
for a lot of reasons. Number one, I don't think unless you're an engineer or a hedge fund person, I don't think a lot of these other jobs are hard.
yeah,
They're just not, like, whether you're the director or the underling, and especially if it's a job that you have to you have to do something that hits like zeitgeist and
yeah,
trends, right? And that could be whether it's media or consumer product or anything. Like, if you have to hit that, it doesn't really, 15 years experience just doesn't make sense to me, because the trends and zeitgeist are always changing. So those people can be just as aggressive and in charge. And I think we see that a lot today with people who are hiring the smart big people like the Mark Cubans, Gary V's, the ones who are finding the 17-year-olds and TikTok stars and saying, hey, tell me about this or tell me about that. And Kanye always said, right, that Kanye West always said, listen to the kids. And I think that's another reason why I always felt like I knew more than these people. I
yeah,
still do, and so do you. And so, but look, the reality is suits run companies, and we all have to work for them at some point, unless you're Zuckerberg. Like, every entrepreneur has to get day job. Like, we have to figure it out, right?
yeah.
It's a long journey, which also took me a long time to realize. It's besides the point. And so I think it's just really important to understand all of that.
Yeah, no, for sure. It resonates a ton, that idea of just because you've been doing it longer than me, just because you're older than me, doesn't necessarily mean that you know better than me, right?
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It
Exactly.
resonates a ton. And it's
Doesn't
interesting.
make any sense.
Yeah, you're talking about zeitgeist, and I saw, one of the videos on Instagram there. You're talking about like noticing dating as a zeitgeist right now. Like, everybody's talking about it, right? Like, it's pop culture. It's huge, right? Everybody's talking about dating. Like, Tinder is culturally important, right? Tinder dating,
Right.
all of everything like that. And I'm just curious, have you always looked at the world that way? Like, have you always kind of seen these bigger macro trends and then kind of latched onto them? Or was it more specific of just like it hit you one day, like dating is a huge one, or, comedy or whatever it might be?
I'm getting emotional over that question. No, I appreciate it. And the research, finding my one or two ever videos I've posted to Instagram. I would say it's it's almost like this weird sort of sixth sense. And I joke with friends or colleagues and I say, I started the V-neck trend in high school. I was you're wearing a V-neck right now. I love it.
That was you. Okay.
I'm all for the V-necks. And I think it was freshman year, I found this cool kind of shirt called a V-neck. This was the late 2000s. Everyone was kind of making fun of me, like, what is that? What is that? Is it an alien suit? Is it like a Martian outfit? And I'm like, no, this is the V-neck.
Yeah.
It's gonna be gigantic. And that that was obviously a micro trend, but it's still obviously very relevant. And I didn't get into fashion or anything like that. But I've always kind of been to answer your question, like why this has kind of been a part of me, Jared, I've always been the person that looks at the world and just asks why, and these could be micro situations at brunch with friends, like, why are we talking about these dates? Or I'm at a pregame. Like, why is everyone taking 8 more shots of tequila, Jose Cuervo tequila, than they should? Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, what is the why behind this? And I think if you ask the why, then you can get closer to the trends. And so dating is a zeitgeist. It's funny saying that. Like, it 4 or 5 years ago when I first started doing, I call it dating comedy, where I had a dating blog and it was like a comedy dating blog, and I would go on dates and broadcast parts of my date. I don't know if you saw that on Facebook. I did this video series.
Yeah.
Dating at that point, online dating was kind of really just picking up. It was becoming part of the zeitgeist. I think people becoming more vulnerable was becoming a part of the zeitgeist. I think relatable, authentic content
Yeah.
was becoming more of the zeitgeist instead of like a lot of this phony kind of television or online stuff. Like, we were seeing the rise of TV shows like A Master of None or Girls, if you're
Yeah.
familiar. And what those shows did that the Seinfeld, obviously Seinfeld, huge hit, didn't really do, like, it was just so raw and so real, and they were funny as well. And so I saw that as a trend coming with content overall. And there were other trends in zeitgeist that I've, like any, entrepreneur, like, you see trends that you call and you just weren't. Someone, my sister was just calling me.
Yeah.
You see the I wish I could get rid of that, but you see these trends in zeitgeist, and some of them I missed. I think, like, there were some tech trends that I missed early on when I was out in San Francisco. I wish I moved to New York with a fat equity stake in Zoom or something.
Yeah.
I think I turned down like an interview with Zoom like 8 years ago. So, there are like trends and zeitgeist you miss. I think it's just like, be aware, talk to people and ask people questions. And
Yeah.
it's people on the ground floor. And there's a funny, like, comedy specific way of, if you're curious, like, that I think is also relevant for entrepreneurs. So Seinfeld always says this, but it's not even about making the audience laugh. The people who buy the tickets, right? Like, they're a certain type of person. It's it's if you're making the bouncer laugh, if you're making the bartender laugh, then I think you're really tapping into culture more than anything else. And
Yeah.
so it's talking to those sorts of folks as well, because you learn so much from that. And I think it's very hard to see. It's very hard when you're in some of these bubble cities, whether it's California or New York City, to kind of recognize what's going on elsewhere. But these places do set trends in a lot of ways. But the other part is, you just have to have an open mind and talk to everyone. You
Yeah.
have to talk to everyone. Just talk to people.
For sure. And, that's an interesting way to, put it. It's not just the people that are in the seats that are, specifically there to laugh, specifically,
Right.
in that mindset. But if you're able to get the people around there that have heard, they hear the
Wow.
stand-up show every single night, several every single night, the bouncer, the bartender, that's a really cool way to look at it.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think the other thing that I personally like about comedy a lot of
I
times,
was going to ask what your take on like, are you a comedy fan? Do you?
I am, but very specific. It's
Yes.
interesting.
Same too,
Yeah.
ironically. Yeah.
Yeah. But, the thing I like about it is that you can a lot of times approach issues that people aren't willing or feel comfortable talking about, because it's coming from a comedy lens. And a lot of times there's some of the most truthful,
Mm.
lessons that you can pull apart, because, when you look past the, like, oh, he's doing this to make me laugh, you can look at, like, oh, what is he actually hitting on here that's, a level or two deeper, and why are people uncomfortable? Why are you getting this reaction out of people? And so, yeah, I think it's a really
Mm.
cool way to just cut through a lot of that noise and go to the core of, like, here's an insecurity, or, like, something that that's on everyone's mind that you don't talk about. And so I'm going to poke at that, and then get that reaction out of you.
Exactly. And everyone kind of does have the power to test comedy, right? Like, maybe not to be like a full-on comedian, but you walk down the street and you pull out your notes, and you recognize things that are just funny or off or interesting. And I think that is like a huge part of it, just over and over and over again.
For sure. And, I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into that original dating show and the Facebook Lives, and, essentially, doing live updates during the dates. Can you go a little bit more into that, and maybe, a couple specific stories on just how that worked, or, some of the situations that you got yourself in?
Definitely. So at a high level, I launched this media company. We were just doing written content at the time. This was a few years ago. Facebook had just launched Facebook Live. And so I was chatting with my producer friend at the time, and we were just trying to figure out something big. I was very single at the time. And I just said, yo, why don't I just start going on dates? I'm going to get permission. I'm going to live broadcast, not the full date, because that would be awkward, but parts of the date experience on Facebook. And I'm just going to be totally myself, very honest, and see if people like it. And so I went on a series of first dates. I wish I did it like 100 times, but dates started canceling on me, as you can imagine. I would be in the Uber on the way to a date, and I would just be self-deprecating. Like, I would talk to my Uber driver, Ronnie, I went with the blue Uniqlo sweater, not the red Uniqlo sweater. What are your thoughts on this? And I would go live, so people are commenting and messaging me. Harrison, you should have gone with agua. I'm like, I don't have an agua shirt, or anything like that. And then midway through the date, this was the origin story of what we do at our live show. We call it the halftime report, sort of like a sporting event. I would excuse myself, go into the bathroom, and report on how the date's going. And that, I think, really hit, because we all do that, right? We text our friends during the date. Oh my God, Ryan, he only talks about his Rolex, right? Like, he's only talking about his Rolex. Get me out of here. And so I went to the bathroom, and this line, people still bring it up to me. It should have been like Oprah viral, but it didn't get to that point. And I said, guys, she ordered a Guinness on our date tonight. Interesting first drink choice for a date. And I got so many comments like, oh my, I know, I figured your date, if she's going beer, it would be a Labatt Blue, or why didn't she order a vodka tonic? Like, that's so standard. So that was the humor. It was this like neurotic people who are neurotic on these dates. We're all a little neurotic on these dates. It's that like specific part of humor that I really resonate with. It's like, it wasn't just that she had a beer. It's like she ordered a Guinness. People remember like the Guinness, not any beer. Like she ordered the Guinness. And this, I swear, like, I've always been pushing projects here and there, and I've started way too many blogs and video series and not continued. But this really was the first thing I did that people were sharing without me yelling at them to share it, like random people. And it was just so exciting. I learned a lot of lessons on why that couldn't succeed to the level of like even our current show, but it was it was really fun. I mean, it was truly fun. And I think just from a confidence standpoint, I guess for your listeners, entrepreneurs and everyone, like, there really are there are specific moments, I think, in our lives when we're pursuing our journey up the mountain. And like, we have a hunch or a gut that this could be our journey. It's not going to happen overnight. Like, it could be our journey. And this was just such a pivotal moment for me, because I always had a weird hunch that, I could be this media guy, this funny person making, talent, producer, all of that. But I never, like I said at the beginning of our chat, I never worked at a production company. I always had that hunch. And I was a bar mitzvah dancer. Like, I've done a lot of these entertainment-y things. But when I did this, it was such validation that, like, you can be good in this crazy path. Like, you have something. And so it's like, all right, that was step one.
Yeah, that's cool. And, I'm curious too.
I go on and on with some of my answers. So cut me off. Cut me off. Seriously, Jared, cut me off if I'm going on for too long.
I'm enjoying it too much to do that. But, talk to me about the importance of self-deprecating humor, because for me, it is one of my favorite things to do. And I think going back to my humor is that I love to also poke at things at people, right? But I, not in a malicious way, but I like to poke at them. I like to see, get a reaction out of them, but also show them like, I'm making fun of myself just as much. And so come back at me for it, because I enjoy like you making fun of me too. And I found, self-deprecating humor does that a lot of times. And it's, I think it, it just makes it better for everyone, instead of, just me pointing at everyone and laughing at them. It's like, no, let's have a good time together instead of just,
Right. I feel like it makes people more comfortable.
yeah,
It makes you more relatable.
yeah,
Anyone who makes themselves a little bit vulnerable, you're automatically going to win people over. That's just the reality of the modern age of building a lot of relationships. And also, I do think the dating, just to say this briefly, I do think it was rare, especially in America. I know you're up in Canada, in American society, to see a man do this on dates, right? When here in America, like there is this very macho attitude, hide your emotions, hide your feelings, be a frat bro, play football,
yeah,
watch football, eat football shaped
yeah,
candy or something. And I do think that was really interesting with that. And I think self-deprecating has kind of always been, I think it like my my therapist would probably say it's a way of like making myself feel better
yeah,
in a lot of ways. You do feel a little less lonely. Like there, it could be as nonchalant and as trivial as I just ate salmon for the first time ever at like 28. I never had salmon, never made it. I was afraid of it. I thought I had some weird allergy to it that like
yeah,
was a figment of my imagination. It never existed. And I had salmon. I made it with this honey balsamic glaze
yeah,
over COVID, and I eat salmon now, and that is what that's like kind of self-deprecating, but I think it's a good example. Like that, who that's so lame. Like who wouldn't eat salmon? It's so good. I love it. I'm loving salmon. So healthy. It's got the omegas, right?
yeah.
And I just discovered it. Like, what is wrong with me?
No,
So I think that is an example. No, that's a great question. Like what? Yeah,
so
that's
funny.
interesting.
It's so funny. Like, as you're talking about, a lot of times, I think here too, a lot of guys feel like, no, I can't make fun of myself. I need to come off as like strong, like you were just saying, macho guy. And, I just started seeing this one girl, and one of the things she said to me, she's like, it threw me off.
And on a date?
Yeah.
Was
She's
this on a
like,
date? Yeah.
yeah. She's like, it threw me off when you made fun of yourself. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Huh.
I've never like been on a date with a guy that made fun of himself. I'm like, well, that sucks for you. Like that sounds super boring, right? Like,
Wow. She said
yeah,
that to you.
yeah. So it's interesting.
So interesting. And we could get into deep conversations about the why behind
Yeah,
that. Don't have to get too deep, but I do think it's a shame because as your date said, like women and do prefer guys who are comfortable being a little bit vulnerable, right? And not shielded. And I think the the macho man is out and the emotional man is in. Very much in.
yeah, for
You'll win
sure.
brownie points for sure.
Yeah, definitely a conversation for another
Although my girlfriend would say I'm too emotional.
time. Too emotional, yeah.
But
Just
that's
let me
the
cry for once instead of you always crying.
exactly. It's so funny.
So go into. I'm curious here. Let's talk about updating a little bit. And
Cool.
so, you start off with the Facebook series, essentially, live streaming these dates, doing the halftime report. You meet Brandon, right? And walk me through that. And you guys have had a lot of success for it. I know that like COVID's been tough for it, but let's talk about
Right. Uh,
early days and how it got
er,
started and what's it growing into.
awesome. Yeah. So the early days, obviously, I did that on digital. It hit like we were tapping into something really interesting. A friend of mine connected me to Brandon. He said, Harrison, you got to meet this guy, Brandon. He's the only other person who can make me laugh like you can. He's in New York.
Yeah.
He's doing stand-up, like Long Island guy. And I got on a call with him and we just started kicking it. And instantly, creatively, we're just on the same page. And I do know a lot of creatives and artists who kind of go through everything alone and they can do very well in that format. I've always just been a collaborative thinker.
Yeah.
I do like having that second voice. And we were trying to figure out what project to do together. He had like an epiphany. He was at a diner with his ex-girlfriend overhearing this date. And the date was not going well. I think someone was ordering a burger or something. Like she didn't want that. And he started commentating over it with his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And the light bulbs went off that there was something here, kind of taking what I was doing what he was doing, knowing live shows well here in New York. And then we kind of came to the conclusion that what I was doing should be on a stage in front of an audience. And it was really cool because my brain was so stuck in followers, digital, YouTube series, growth mode. But he brought this awesome perspective on let's fill rooms and let's try and build an audience that way. It's a little old school, but it's a way to separate ourselves. And we started the show, obviously called it Updating. We did it at a taqueria in Tribeca with 20 people there, sold out. People couldn't stop laughing the entire night. I think the guy spilled a margarita on his date or something. It was just the whole shebang. And the show started growing from there. Bigger venues, selling out weeks in advance, thousands of people applying to be on the show, all through word of mouth, which was truly the craziest part of this. Like, we're these two comedians who really don't know anything about matchmaking, setting these two people up on date. Everyone always asks us about casting, and we do have a rhyme and a reason. Like, there's a secret, it's like a mysterious element to it. But we would cast these people. They would go on the date, blindfolded for it. Brandon hosts it. He interviews them, really gets into their psyche. They do the halftime report on how the date's going. I'm with the audience. I'm co-hosting it. Like, we're getting feedback and DMs from the crowd. And I might offer commentary here and there about things I'm noticing. And it's cool at our show because we make it interactive. We make it this experience where if you're in the audience, not only can you message us during the show, like, Brody shouldn't have worn those Gucci sneakers, like, get him off the stage. You can do that, but you can also message us if you're into one of the daters. I'm not sure if you saw that. I don't know if you saw that, Jared.
I heard like a little bit about that of like people reaching out afterwards. But
exactly. People, so during the show you can message us and you could say, hey, I'm so into Brad. Brad is 6'6". I'm from North Carolina, and this is from a Kimberly in the audience. And so we'll call out, okay, we have a Kimberly, we have a Rachel, we have a Rebecca. They want to steal your date, Jennifer, and meet Brad. I'm going to step aside and we're going to see how this goes. And so it creates this electric moment and it gets the audience involved. And it really is just so funny. And I think, yes, it's a dating show, but before it's a dating show, it's a comedy show. And that is just so important. We've had a lot of identity pieces to that over time. And the show took over New York. It became this great brand here in the city. We were making great money, which is awesome. So we were kind of wearing the entrepreneur hat as well, like growing this at the highest level in event business, right? Like, when you think about it, like, we were not only creators, but producers of this event. And COVID hit. Dun, dun, dun. Who would have thought? It obviously has been challenging, just moving everything to digital. We tried the Zoom stuff. We tried Instagram. We did sign a TV deal, a development deal to adapt Updating for TV, which is still ongoing. I think we've learned a lot that we need our live show to come back for that fully to happen. Hollywood, when Hollywood calls, you get super excited in the beginning, but then you have these meetings with Hollywood and you realize it doesn't happen as overnight as you think. And there is a lot of BS that you kind of have to see through. It's still very cool. We ended up working with NBC actually to work on this. But long story short, where we're at today, COVID's finally starting and New York is reopening. We're going to bring our live show back with a bang. We're actually doing our first tour. So for those listening, if you're in Philly, Boston, DC, maybe Chicago, who knows, maybe Calgary, Updating is going to be going on tour. And we're just trying to create a New York, let's just own creating Coachella in New York City every Friday night, keep building our audience. And then eventually we can start a production company, develop other projects, possibly do other kinds of events and run our media company, really, which we have a full production company now, and it's extremely exciting. So we're always looking out for new projects to develop, but Updating's journey is not finito yet. We're still in the in the mid innings, I would say.
No, that's super cool. And, you know, like as soon as I saw, right, as soon as I saw what it was and started digging into it a little bit, it's such an interesting concept. It makes so much sense, right? If,
Right.
you know, take one of the most vulnerable places that you
Yeah.
have to be first date.
I was going to ask, like, what was your first thoughts? Like just seeing the concept or
Yeah,
hearing about the
it
concept.
made total sense to me. Like right away, it was just like, yes, this makes sense, right? Of like, you have to be super vulnerable. You have to be uncomfortable. You're going to be uncomfortable no matter what, right? Of like, it's a first date, you're going to be uncomfortable. Doing it up in front of a stage, like up on a stage for everyone to see and everyone to judge every single, you know, move that you make, which is
Crazy.
both hilarious and terrifying at the same time. And then the idea of like physically being blindfolded, because I don't know, you know, for people that are listening later, but you're physically blindfolded as well, so you
For
don't
the first
actually
half of the
know.
show.
Yeah, you don't
Yep.
actually know what that person looks like, and even the whole reveal on that side of thing, of even fumbling more, right? Of it made total sense to me, and so the first half you're blindfolded, and the second half after the halftime report you're not. Is that how it works?
Exactly. You're blindfolded for the first half. And it's funny. Daters, when they're blindfolded, are looser. What we've found,
Yeah.
they're so comfortable and loose, and they're just going with it because, you know, we're in this superficial dating world today, of course, right, with the apps and everything. So when you're blindfolded, it's so surreal, and it's almost like it's a trippy experience, actually. It's truly a trippy experience. I did a special edition one on my birthday. I
Okay.
was a dater just to experience it.
Cool.
And it's just, I wanted to like better produce it and understand it. And
Yeah.
when you're blindfolded, you are truly in another world, and you can be your most authentic self. So then the blindfolds come off. There's this awkward, are you going to hug or
Yeah.
handshake or fist bump? Or are you looking at your friend like, yo, get me out of here? Like,
Yeah.
nah.
Yeah.
And
We've
it's
got.
so, that is obviously an electric moment. Everyone's pulling out their phone, and it kind of has like that Super Bowl halftime effect. And then in the second half of the show, whether the date continues, if the blindfolds come off and it worked out, or the date doesn't continue and someone else takes over the date,
Yeah.
we do a very cool section where Brandon will reveal what each person said about the other person. So that I think is real. That I think is really interesting too, because we all want to know how we're doing on these dates and getting feedback, and we never get feedback. And I can't. We had shows where Tyler went up there and said, "Look, I love everything about Rachel. She's beautiful. She's smart. She went to Columbia. She plays water polo. She does all of this, but she did not ask me one question on this date." And so we told Rachel that. Very uncomfortable moment.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear it, but if we don't say it, who will? Not that we're like trying to be like these, you know, write a rule book on dating. Maybe we will at some point, but it's just very interesting. It's cool. I appreciate your kind words there, Jared. I think that means a lot. We'll have to have you at the show and any of your listeners.
Next time.
Are you in a relationship or?
I just started seeing somebody, still figuring it
Very
out,
cool.
but yeah.
Okay. No, that's a fun. Well, you could bring that special someone as well. You know, if you're not on the show, we have a lot of couples that go to updating as a date night, as
Yeah.
a, you know, as
Oh
like
yeah.
which is so cool. And we've had people bring a first date to watch a first date at the show,
Yeah.
like as a fun date activity.
Yeah.
And it really is just so fun. And I think I took for granted a little bit, like the come up, and then COVID happened. I definitely took it for granted because, and still, you know, I have goals. But we have goals we need to achieve, right?
Yeah.
That we're not there yet. But I think when we look at the evidence, like we are more than on our way, and we're not at level 1 anymore. So it's exciting.
No, it's a super cool concept, and like I said, as soon as I saw it, it just made sense, and you know, on so many different levels too, right? Of like you're saying,
Yeah.
it's not a dating show, right? And it's
Right.
not just a comedy show, right? It has so many different elements. It's playing on so much, and that's I think what I resonate so much with it. You
I
know, kind of
appreciate
switching,
that.
yeah, of course, and you know, switching things up a little bit, and just more so selfishly and curious for myself on hearing that you know, we're working in the valley, we're working for Facebook for a couple of years, you know, as like call it one of those jobs that a lot of people want or think like, that's kind of the pinnacle. Like I work at Facebook, I work at a Google, or, one of those like big companies. And having that choice to be like, what, I enjoyed this, or maybe you didn't, right? But, I'm here. I'm probably looked up to by a lot of people around me, but I know that this isn't for me and I want to pursue, my thing and, going that more media production
Mm,
company lifestyle talent route that you did. Can you walk me through that decision of
mm.
I'm going to leave I'm going to leave Facebook and I'm going to go do my own thing. I'm going to build towards my goals.
It's a great question. It's not an easy decision to make, for sure. I think at the end of the day, it's important to have a vision for where you want to take things, where you want to go. And Facebook was a terrific experience. I learned so much. I truly did learn so much. Like I was in the belly of the beast. I learned a lot about content, about trends. This was a really interesting time at Facebook. And 2016, the big question in the media was, is Facebook a media company? Like everyone was asking that. So it was really interesting just being there when we launched Facebook Live. But at the end of the day, I think I think it comes down to side hustle until main hustle. Like that's always sort of been in my brain. And I've always just felt more alive doing content, like doing creative work and being an entrepreneur, right? I've always just felt more alive doing that. And I think it's not as black and white as a lot of people make it out to be, like leaving a big company. Like
Yeah.
chances are, I also didn't really want to be a starving artist in LA
Yeah.
or Queens by JFK and not be able to pay rent, right? So you find other ways to pay rent and make money. And I think I still get stressed out about some of that, even though we're finally in a good place now.
Yeah.
But I think leaving Facebook, I looked around, amazing, brilliant, smart people. We just had different dreams, different goals, right? Like my goal was never really to be a media ops manager, a media part. These are awesome gigs, amazing. You're kind of set for life when you're at one of these companies and you're a little older. But I think for me, I just wanted to feel more alive and continue working towards those goals. And obviously the financial piece, like at first I'm I would say my 20s, I was literally the cliche millennial, just living in the clouds, not really thinking about money, like impact, starting, laughter, like not really thinking like, okay, money, revenue, all of these things. Like, how are you supporting yourself? And over the past couple of years, I'm getting to that point. And so you realize you can make money doing a lot of different things, right? And especially this route that we're going, like starting a media company, building a show, like you look at the numbers and what we earned from our show just 1 year when it wasn't even that big.
Yeah.
And you look at stand-up comedians who tour and start companies, like you can do very well, right? Like this isn't like there's kind of no ceiling. So
Yeah.
thinking about all those factors kind of led to me leaving Facebook. And I think everyone can have this windy path, but that was just the one for me.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That makes total sense. I think a lot of times people are afraid to make that jump though, right?
It's
Um,
scary. It is scary. It's very scary. I mean, it's extremely scary because you look at especially if you go to, more of a traditional school, you look at your friends who they stayed at Wells Fargo all of their entire 20s, right?
yeah.
Or they're in politics or they're becoming eye doctors. I feel like I have 6 eye doctor friends. For, everyone wants to be an eye doctor.
Yeah.
You look at that and you're like, oh wow, like they went down these traditional paths. Like that's cool. But I think you just have to like trust in your gut that is just not for you,
Yeah.
right? And respect your friends. We're human, so sometimes you do get those thoughts of like the more traditional path. It's very human to think that, but I think you just have to trust your gut and just keep, you're just continuing to make this measured progress. I think is really important. Like the progress is so important because that is just validation, right? If you like if you don't have, let's say I just thought of the show idea for updating on this call, right? And I said next week I'm going to throw this thing together. It would be tough, right? It would be tough because just starting something from scratch it's very difficult. But once you start seeing progress and feedback, then you just have to keep going. Like there's no other choice. Like we're already so deep. Like there's just no other choice.
Yeah. Once you have that momentum behind you, right? You just got to keep.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, that's
Exactly.
cool. One of the last things I want to ask you about here too is, again, something you mentioned offhand, but I'm just interested in is, that process of seeing yourself as a talent, like seeing yourself as a comedian. Do you think it was just because it was so natural, like in you, that you've always been that way? You didn't really identify it, or do you think it was more of like an imposter syndrome of just like, oh, I'm not a comedian. I haven't done like X, Y, Z that would classify me as a comedian or a talent. Where do you think that came from?
That's such a good question. I would say it's more of the latter, sort of the imposter syndrome in a lot of ways. I've always looked at my job title as producer first, because being a producer, A, it sounds cool. Like it does sound very cool. But B, the producer role has always been cool for me because it does take a lot of these business kind of marketing, like zeitgeist skills that I have and connecting into like a product, right? Like producing something and kind of overseeing productions that are talent driven as well. I think that's always been a part of it. But the comedian part, like being talent, it I it took me a while to really just realize this, that I was talent and funny in my own right, because I just I didn't go down that traditional comedian path, like doing stand up. And I give my, creative partner, Brandon, who he's a huge stand up comic. He's like, Harrison, like, why are you overthinking? You're a comedian, right? Like, he's like,
Yeah.
you're a comedian, just stop. Like Tina Fey never did stand up. And it is really cool hearing that, because it just validates this kind of path. And now I fully own it. I own it. But I think I was just afraid of kind of saying that, because I'm not like the traditional comedian. I was so neurotic and in my own head about this. I was literally Googling, like, what is a comedian? Like, define a comedian. And I think like there are, we have definitions that we're used to, which is the Amy Poehler and doing stand up. And then there are different definitions, right? Like Larry David didn't really do much stand up. I think P. Diddy is a comedian, but he's never done stand up. But without a doubt, he's a comedian, right? He's so funny.
Yeah.
And so cool. So it's such a good question, because it did take me time, and now I own it. I love it. It's fun to say, I'm a comedian. And I think being a business minded comedian too, like having these business experiences, like it only helps. It only helps, so it's a good question. Yeah.
Okay. No, thanks for sharing that. As we're wrapping up here, is there anything that we didn't get to that you wanted to mention, or just anything that you feel called to say, anything like that?
I'm trying to think. We could keep going too, my man. If is there anything else you want to ask me or go over?
I think like those are my big.
Yeah, I think
yeah.
Yeah, no, this is rad. I mean, at the end of the day, for your listeners who are, they're trying to figure out, like, do I start something? Do I figure it to, well, what am I, right? Like all these things, like the few things I would share is it's always evolving. It's always evolving. Invest in understanding yourself. I think that's really important, whether it's like coaching or therapy or journaling, like all these things are really important to just kind of have that validation for who you are. And the gut is just so important. Trust in the gut. You got to just trust the gut. Like, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. And, a lot of people who either, whether it's the creative world or you want to be an entrepreneur and start a business, the doubt happens. I mean, the doubt is all the time, truly all the time. But you have to put it into a corner in your brain and just keep going. Like, it's just so important. You just have to. That's all I tell myself, really. Like, just keep going. And I think keep going. solve the short-term problems. And then I truly believe in my heart, like everything I want is happening and everything I really want will happen. You know, the financial goals I have, the freedom, the creative freedom goals I have, whether it's writing a book or doing things like that, like it all will happen. Just got to be a little patient and just like keep going. So yeah, no, I really enjoyed chatting with you,
Yeah.
Jared. I think we could chat all night.
I was literally gonna say I have to be careful because I know like I could just keep going and
It's fun. No,
oh,
it's
yeah,
fun, and to speak to someone like minded
yeah,
is also really cool. And I know you mentioned on your phone you're when we did our kind of pre-interview, you're starting to get the wheels moving for starting something in the food and beverage industry, right? And
yeah.
yeah, I'm sure you're like the doubt does creep in, right?
Yeah, no, and while you were talking about that, like, you know, what came up for me was that idea of progress over perfection. And that's kind
I
of what
like
I tell
that.
myself, right? Is like, you know, it doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to happen tomorrow, but like just keep going, like you're saying, right? If you just keep going, like one step in front of the other, you keep going, you keep going, you keep going. One day you turn around and you look back and realize actually how far you've come, right? And I don't know if that's maybe what happened with COVID because it was for you, right? It was that forced hard stop. It's like shit. Now I'm not
Crazy.
in it anymore, right? It's like now I have the time because it's so hard when you're in it. Like with the last business I'm
Right.
doing, it's so crazy where you know every day feels like a century and every week feels like a second, right? Because it's
Surreal.
yeah,
Truly surreal.
yeah, you're in it so much you don't have that time to like pause and look back and like, oh shit, like, you know, I've done a lot, or like it's growing a lot, it's going from here to here. And so sometimes I think for me with COVID specifically, that was my big things, perspective. It put a lot of
Mm.
into perspective for me because it was the first time in my life since I've been, you know, call it 16, that I had a forced stop. And it's just like, no, like you can't, you're stopping now, and reevaluating, lots of perspective. It's been, for how shitty it's been, it's also been a really good experience. So,
Have you found ways to kind of get creative juices out during COVID?
well,
Right.
it's funny where a lot of my questions around, you know, like imposter syndrome and, you know, identifying yourself as, you know, a talent is, so before I started doing the podcast, I would literally, there would be one photo of me uploaded every 1 to 2 years to let people know I was still alive on social media, right? And like
Wow.
that was,
Wow.
you know, the extent of it. And then so like, you know, huge personal growth pieces and just pushing myself, doing new things, and that's where it really started from. And it's like, you know, I've done more, you know, like something like this would not have even entered into the realm of possibility for me, you know,
Mm.
2 years ago, right? And so, yeah, it's been trying to accept the fact that I do have a creative side, maybe not, you know, like the traditional that you look at it like an artist or even like a director,
Right.
right? I don't see myself like that, and that might be that little bit of the imposter syndrome, but whatever it is, right? It's slowly starting to accept that fact that I have a creative side. I need my creative outlets, and I
Mm.
look a little bit different, but identifying them and like accepting them is the big thing, right? So
I think that's awesome. I forget who said it, but someone, you know, that we all have this like inner creativity when we're kids, right? And I think like it's always going to be there. Obviously, some people like it's just a weird, there's just a weird sixth sense for creativity that kind of just happens. And another Tarantino quote, he was on an interview, I think it was with Howard Stern, and they were talking about Glorious Bastards. Have you seen that movie?
I haven't seen it
Uh,
specifically, but I know what it
Great
is.
movie.
Yeah,
Great movie. And I think Howard asked him, like, how did you come up with that? He's like, and Tarantino was like, I don't know. Right. Like
yeah,
the premise of that movie was just so far out there. Like, where does that even come from?
yeah.
So that level is just like, whoo, that is truly crazy. And yeah, no, just my final point on pandemic and perspective. I think it's so important because you get perspective on what worked, right? Like I can't tell you how many people have asked me about updating during this, right? And there's a reason for that. And there's a reason why I've had quotes and from Washington Post reporters reaching out to me, right? Like this beast that we made is real. It's not just an idea. Like and it's successful, and it's like let's keep going, right? Let's keep getting it to the next phase. So it really helped put things in perspective for us when you're doing it, especially in the early stages. I mean, there's so many funny stories, but we had venues that didn't even have chairs. I had to I had to express delivery Home Depot like
Yeah.
80 chairs to my tiny Manhattan apartment. I
Yeah.
think I slept on the floor. Like, and we didn't even have helpers or interns or employees at the time. We like got 3 Uber exit or XLs and we schlepped them across town to do this show. And like
Yeah.
those are just such cool stories that when you're doing it, you don't really think, okay, we're gonna look back and like really laugh about, not only laugh about it, but see the progress. I think is really cool.
Yeah, like it, that story brings up so many of my own, and like old war
Yeah.
stories are my favorite.
Oh my God.
Well,
It's
we'll have to go into them one day for sure. Because
no, we gotta keep
yeah,
we
yeah,
gotta no, I'm definitely excited to
yeah,
now keep chatting and happy to help support anything you're working on,
cool,
Jared. And anytime you're in New York or I'm up in Canada, we'll connect.
awesome.
So
Yeah, New York's actually one of my favorite places, so I'm hoping to
oh,
meet
there you go.
sooner
Come
rather than
back.
later.
We're
Yeah.
coming back. We're coming back. You can hear the sirens from here, I'm sure.
So if people want to, find out a little bit more about updating about yourself, where's the best place for them to follow you? To get updates, everything like
Oh, I just realized I'm so dark.
that.
Because I didn't have my video on. I have my video on, just not my self view. That's so dark. Wow. Trust me, I'm not sketchy like this.
You were
So
perfect before. It's just the sun
uh
slowly gone down.
the sun, yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, the sun is gone. So to learn more about updating, go to @updating show on Instagram. If you want to be on the show, you can go to our website, updating show /casting. Or if you know of any friends in any of these cities, they'll want to be on our live show when it returns. Obviously, want folks who don't take themselves too seriously, who are funny and ready to open up. So definitely check us out on Instagram. Check me out on Instagram @HT Foreman. I sometimes will post movie recs or TV show recs or interesting gospel videos I do on TikTok that I'll post about, or just random writing. So yeah, definitely check me out on Instagram, and really appreciate everyone listening. And thanks for having me on the pod, Jared. Best of luck with everything. It's all gonna happen for you. Just got to keep going, keep
Thank
pushing.
you.
You got this.
I-
Write it on your wall. You got this, and visualize it. Like the law of attraction it is kind of a real thing. Like really, not just like thinking about this stuff, but like putting it on your wall and really visualizing it. So, but no, this was fun.
I appreciate it. Yeah,
I
no,
love it.
it
Thanks
means
for
a lot.
having me.
Yeah, of course. The last question that I ask everybody
Uh oh.
here. Yeah. So what does this next phase in your journey look like?
Ooh. The next phase of my journey.
Take it any way you want.
In
Personal,
my personal
professional,
journey, professional journey,
wherever you want to go.
I would say the next phase in my professional journey is I'm just going to use one word, one line, being in the culture.
Love it.
I think like we're a couple steps away from really being in the culture. And when the brands or people that are in the culture, and like we're in it in New York City, and obviously New York is not the world, right? So it's being in the culture professionally, and that obviously comes with financial elements that I think I'm confident we're going to hit. And then personally, the next phase of my journey personally, man, I would say being in the moment more and just taking deep breaths and just finding my zen is extremely important. Phone off at certain times, phone on at certain times. Just really trying to be in that moment, and just pay attention more. Try and have less anxiety. So we'll see. We'll see how that. It's not working out too well, but we'll see.
No, those are amazing sentiments. Again,
Cool.
appreciate you. Thank you for the kind words. Had a ton of fun. We'll connect soon. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Jared.